Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Friday, May 17, 2024, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're going to wrap up the week by doing one of our sort of bi-weekly honest reviews, if we like to call them our honest reviews, because we don't get paid by anybody yet. And we would always let you know if this was a sponsored post, but nothing is sponsored so far. And so these are truly our honest reviews of different products, different softwares. We've done ones with Hyperwrite, we've done ones with Perplexity, and so on and so forth. And today we actually want to look at Anthropic's console. So we'll get into all what that means. What is the console? Is it a brand new thing? Has it always been around? We'll dig into all of that. But before we do that, let me tell you who we have today. We have Beth, Karl, Andy, and I'm Brian. And like I said, this is sort of Anthropic's been around for, it's probably been one of our favorite tools, I think, internally at this team for quite some time. They're the ones that make Claude. If you are not familiar with their name, if you're like Anthropic who, it's kind of like saying Microsoft, but meaning Copilot, Google, but meaning Gemini, Alphabet, but meaning Google, right? You know, like it gets confusing with all these names, but Anthropic is the parent company that makes Claude. Claude also has 3 different models in it right now. So you have to keep those names like Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus. And then they have the API side of things, right? Where you can sort of do some more cooler developer side things, but they're not restricted. You can go in and play in the playground in the sandbox and have lots of fun. And that's really what today's show is all about. So with that all said, who wants to kick this off? I think, Andy, you were just saying you have some demos and stuff. Why don't you get us rolling with this?
Yeah, as a reminder, Anthropic was founded by some ex-OpenAI scientists. They left OpenAI to found Anthropic, and they built what is known as a constitutional LLM, meaning it had built into its original fundamental training some rules of engagement that apparently OpenAI didn't satisfy. So it's like the white knights of AI development over there. So yeah, I'm going to share my screen, and I want to. The title of this show today is, has Anthropic made prompting easy now? And this is a very interesting proposition that I'm going to demonstrate right now, because what they did recently is they built a tool here on their dashboard called Generate a Prompt, which is using their top model, Opus, to create a prompt out of just a general instruction. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take I'm going to copy and paste this in here because I did this before the show. Okay. So I don't have to type it in. But I just will read to you what I'm asking it to do. Okay, acting as an encouraging teacher, you discuss a topic, and I put that topic phrase there, you can see on the screen, into double squiggly brackets, which is Anthropic's model for how to insert a variable. So I'm just queuing it up to Anthropic, saying I'm going to use topic as a variable here because I want to repeat use of this, and I want to just be able to change the topic easily. Okay, providing an interesting but less well-known fact about the subject as an introduction to your dialogue with the user on the subject matter. You then explore the main concepts or subtopics that are relevant to the topic. Once you've completed the topic presentation, you summarize the top, and I put another variable in your takeaways count so I can modify how deep it's going to dig into the basic concepts within that subject, and ask the user if there are any questions. Okay, so it might operate, you could use a prompt like this with OpenAI or Claude or even Mistral or whatever, and it might work. But we've learned working with prompts that adding some structure to the prompt confers a lot of benefits to it, including improving the output of the model. So Opus has been trained to write really good prompts, applying structure to this general request for how to do it. So I click Generate Prompt, and it grinds away a little bit. And now look at what it comes back with, which is going to be considerably different from what I just wrote. Okay. Dum, 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 dum. Okay. it's pulled out these things here as one of the key variables here.
Let's be a little bit more descriptive, just because obviously we have people who are listening. Obviously, if you're listening to this on any podcast and you're listening to us in the car or the train or something like that, this is one of these shows where you definitely want to go back over to our YouTube channel and watch the video version of this. But just because Andy, I know we have people listening as well, so we pulled back what at the top here, some variables.
We'll also put the link into the description, and if you want to go take a look at our LinkedIn page, and we'll have it there.
There you go.
Right. Okay. So what it's done is it says it basically creates the first piece of a typical structured prompt, which is assigning a role to the AI. You will be acting as. Act as is a good phrase to capture that. And you're going to be discussing the topic with the student, and it shows within topic tags that this is the topic variable you see in the double squiggly brackets. It then says, to begin the lesson, research an interesting, see it added research an interesting but less well-known fact about the topic to use as an engaging introduction. Write this introduction inside intro tags. So in its output, it's going to separate this section, that introduction, with intro and intro tags to denote it. Next, explore the main concepts and subtopics that are most relevant and important for the student to understand about the topic. Explain each concept clearly and provide examples where helpful. Write this main lesson content inside lesson tags. Okay, I'm not sure I ever used the term lesson in here, but it's applying that to the main body. After covering the key points, summarize the top takeaways, and then it defines this next variable in double squiggly brackets called takeaways count, and list these takeaways in a numbered list inside summary tags. Okay, that's a great way to do it. I want a numbered list for those. Okay, finally, encourage the student's curiosity and further learning by asking, write questions, and then write this inside questions tags. Remember to keep an encouraging and supportive tone throughout to motivate the student's learning, and so on. So you see, it really embellished what I wrote, and it provides a structure that is going to work particularly well with Opus. And so now we're going to start editing. And what that does is it puts that prompt that I just generated into the workbench. And now I'm in the workbench, which is Playground in effect. OpenAI has a similar one called Playground. I'm now in the workbench. And you see over on the right here, it's defined the variables, topic and takeaways count. It has the prompt here. And now all I have to do to execute a run of this prompt is to enter a topic. So I'm going to say horse herd behavior. And the takeaways count, I want it to generate 4 takeaways from each topic that I enter. Okay, now I'm all set up. I've got a great prompt. It's well structured. I've got my variables on the right, and I'm going to click run. And here's what we get out of it.
And can I just add one more thing to this while you're doing this? Don't forget, we also have the model settings, because you could have set Opus, Sonnet, or Haiku, and you also could have set temperature for this as well, which are usually on my screen or on the left side of the screen.
Right, and the model is down here below the prompt. You see down here, I'm clicking it open.
There you go. That's what I was talking about right there.
There you go. Right.
So you can set your temperature. So right now, your temperature is set at 0, which means there's going to be very, very little creativity, which in this case, I think totally makes sense, but it's something worth mentioning.
Yeah. And what's beautiful about Workbench or OpenAI Playground is you can adjust these and run it again and see what you get the next time. And you can adjust it, or you pick a new topic and change the temperature on that. Maybe I want it to, maybe the topic is, some creative writing, and I want, temperature to be high for that. Okay, so I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it's come up with a beautiful composition within those tags that it described. And I'll just read the introduction. It says, did you know that horses can form deep social bonds within their herds? Horses are highly social animals with complex relationships and hierarchies. In fact, a horse's position in the herd can even impact its health and well-being. Okay. Then at the bottom down here, it's provided the 4 takeaways. 1, horses are highly social animals that naturally live in herds. 2, the lead mare and lead stallion play important roles in guiding and protecting the herd. 3, horses communicate through body language, vocalizations, and facial expressions. And 4, a horse's social status within the herd can impact its overall health and well-being. All right. Now, if I wanted to, do this again on a different subject, I just click on these double squiggly brackets that set variable values in the user section here of the prompt. And it brings up again the variables, topic, and takeaways count. I can adjust them and I'm off to the races. I can move very quickly, modifying in small ways just through my variables, the prompt that's been really well developed already by Anthropic. I think this is a great tool. I encourage everybody to use it. I've worked in OpenAI's Playground. It has some additional features which are interesting, including side-by-side comparison. But this is just what you need right here.
But OpenAI, no other tool writes the prompt for you. No other tool says, sure, you don't know what you're doing, just give us a thing and we'll give you a first draft of the prompt. And then you get to tweak it.
I want to call out too. Because I just want to add one extra thing to that. And I don't know if it did it in yours, Andy, because I was trying to read it on the screen as you were doing it. But one of my favorite things that it does when it writes the post is add Scratchpad. And I don't see, if you ask a ChatGPT to write custom GPT prompts, you won't get this idea of Scratchpad. And what that is, I think it's so innovative or so novel, the way that Claude works, is a Scratchpad is essentially Claude's, whatever model they're using, way of thinking in the background without needing to tell the user everything. And one of the issues I will tell you I run into when I write so many custom GPTs, both internally, externally, for sale, all that stuff for sale, right? So I've probably written well over 50 custom GPTs at this point that are in some varying states. One of the things that I have to write into the instructions often is, hey, you don't need to tell the user everything. Sometimes I just want you to do the work, but you don't need to repeat it. I'll give you an example of that. When I'm running one for sales, and in that custom GPT, I need to take in information from the end user, the sales rep, about their company. So let's say I'm putting in information from Scaled's website. So about one of our services, one of our RevOps services or whatever. Okay. Well, the custom GPT needs that information to do its job. But do I need it to retell the user what those services are about RevOps at scale? No, the rep knows what they're selling. They don't need a rehash of that. And so oftentimes what I find is you have to go in there and actually adjust it a little bit and say, hey, ChatGPT, think about this, do it. Don't tell the user about it. It's unnecessary. It's volume upon volume. What Claude does a phenomenal job of is when it writes its prompts, it adds in scratch pads, and those scratch pads enable the prompt in the back end to go, this is what I need to think about in order to do it. It's very similar to what we saw with like Baby AGI or God Mode, was it, back in 2023, where you could see the thinking behind the prompt, which is not only super helpful for learning how to prompt, because then you can see what the model is thinking before it produces an answer, but it also is just a really innovative way of keeping some of the stuff out of the end result. So in other words, ChatGPT often thinks out loud. Claude, in something like this, will not only show you how to write a better prompt, it'll do the better prompt, and it'll show you how to get it to think behind the scenes. Really, really cool stuff. Really cool stuff.
So Brian, can you show us on your screen, can you show us where Scratchpad is? Because I don't see it either.
Yes, if I can find one. Let me see if it's in my example here. Go ahead. I tell you what, go ahead and Karl, let me look at one or two of my examples, because it's definitely in there, but I don't know if it did it on every single one of them.
Say what? Sorry.
I was throwing to you. I had more time.
Go, Karl.
Basically, go, Karl, so I have more time to work.
Okay. No, I just, for me, one of the most useful, the best use case I've had for this is if I'm stuck somewhere on the prompts that I normally create. It's very funny. I actually use this to help me go into Microsoft Copilot Studio to fix a Copilot Studio Copilot that I was building that just couldn't do a couple things. So I took the problem to Anthropic's the console, and it fixed it. it's very, so I was just using it one to another. So I like having something like this to help me double check. But I do want to point out, with everything going towards voice, and I wanted to see if you guys would test this out, is what are we thinking about voice prompting? Like, what does that look like if we want to get a response via voice? Do we do the same thing? Is it something different? Do we use this? I don't know what that looks like, what that means. I don't know, but just I was thinking about that as we were just talking.
I've thought about this as well, and right now, if you're going to build an application that's going to be voice interactive, the platforms, the Assistant API, and so on, even at OpenAI, aren't set up yet to take advantage of 4.0's ability to do this in a streaming fashion. So you can just feed audio and get audio back directly from the model without all the sort of side hustles, if you will, with other models in order to do text to voice to text, and then text to response, and then response to voice. That has to be done through a chain of model actions. And we're all waiting for the platform. I hope it's OpenAI. Maybe Anthropic will get there soon. Probably OpenAI and Google will be the ones who actually deliver a tool like this, where a prompt isn't any longer a text structure. The prompt is something to guide, like a system prompt. There'll be a system prompt there, but the conversation is going to be the substance of the exchange with the LLM. So I don't think it's available yet, but I'm betting that OpenAI will be the first to deliver that through custom GPTs. And so custom GPTs are going to proliferate based on this new voice interaction capability that 4.0 provides. And there's going to be, in the playground, there's going to be ways to do that along with the Assistance API.
Probably another show, because are you ready, Brian? you good to
go? Brian, you are muted.
Thank you. I was doing that because I was typing in the back. I was trying to be polite. So I can show this briefly here. There's a Scratchpad in this particular example. And in this particular case, I don't want to get too deep into it, but we were playing around with education and stuff like that internally. So what happens is, as the user, I inputted a bunch of variables about a particular user, a profile, right? So Emily, she's 25. She's a data scientist. Her learning style is visual, blah, blah, blah. Well, what you can see is it says Scratchpad, and this is inputted by Claude. And it's saying, given Emily's intermediate knowledge level and visual learning style, I should focus on providing diagrams and flowcharts to explain concepts like few-shot learning. I could also introduce a hands-on coding challenge to reinforce our understanding of these topics. End of Scratchpad. Right after that, it says what it would actually give back as the result, which is, hey, Emily, today we'll dive into the fascinating world of few-shot and so and so. As a visual learner, I think you'll appreciate this diagram that illustrates the key differences between these approaches. Now, I should point out that Claude is not providing, if you're listening to us, you're not like, holy crap, it's providing key visuals and diagrams and infographics. No, but this is a good idea of just showing like what a Scratchpad looks like. And that's built by Claude. That's not me doing. I could prompt that in there, but this is that God mode. This is that baby AGI that we saw last year, where the model is saying, based on what I see, here's my background thinking about this before I provide an answer. Now, we can assume to a certain extent all LLMs are doing this. They're using a mixture of experts and so on and so forth. But I do love when you get to see it out loud, because what you're seeing is so important as a prompt engineer. And you use that term however you want. Anybody that's creating prompts who wants to get better at prompting, this tool is so crucial, because you are getting an opportunity to see behind the curtain. You're seeing the master behind the curtain work. And this can really influence the way you turn around and write prompts. So yes, is Claude already giving you a really great prompt to start from? Absolutely. But I will tell you, there's not a custom GPT prompt that I write today that I don't feed through Claude. Not because I copy and paste and discard the last one, because I'm learning from the way that Claude rewrites the prompt to figure out how I can go back and better engineer and write the one in Custom GPT. Because Scratchpad, I'll be honest, doesn't work as well in Custom GPT. It's not a direct copy and paste. But if I see the way Claude is thinking about it, I have a good idea and understanding of how GPT-4 is thinking about it, put quotes around that, right? And so I can use what I'm learning here to influence and have a better adaptation of my prompt back on ChatGPT. And then what I also wanted to just show on this tab instead is, for my demo today, I wanted to share this really quickly. You guys know I like my movie mashup. I bring it back over and over again because it's just a fun way to look at prompting. So I took my movie mashup prompt that I talked about several times, and I threw it into Claude like Andy did. And I said, hey, write a prompt for this. But the prompt I gave it it's extensive. It's got like 10 different steps and tasks to it. And I was like, go ahead, Claude, make this better. So Claude took a shot at it. And of course I had to come up with, if you don't know this, you take any two movies and then it will create a new story about those movies. That's what this it's just a fun way to do things. So I had to think of two movies. The first two that came into my head were Toy Story and Weekend at Bernie's. Don't ask me why. I don't know why those are the first two, but I thought, what would be a funny movie that takes the stories of Weekend at Bernie's and Toy Story into it? And lo and behold, it basically came back after I ran it, because what you do when you're adding, if you could see my screen, when you're adding the variables and you're running the prompts here, there's an option to add that back into the conversation. So you're basically getting a ChatGPT or Claude experience. It's a little bit more left and right, but it works exactly the same. So basically what we have are some main characters, main Toy Story characters. We got Buzz Lightyear and Woody Sanders, which made me think of Barry Sanders. Anyway, it was funny that it just, the way it did the names. And so we have two toys, and basically, well, that's the older one. That's the older version of it. But regardless, the gist of this story that it came up with is that you got toys that live in this store, and you've got two bumbling kind of idiot employees that are human employees. They don't know that the toys come to life, a la Toy Story. And the two idiot employees, as the store is getting ready, they've had some financial difficulties. As the store is getting ready to have their district manager come down and do a big review to determine whether this store should stay open or closed, right about the time, about a week or two out, the bumbling employees find that their manager has had a heart attack and is now in fact dead at his desk. And now these two idiots decide, just like Weekend at Bernie's, do we want to save our jobs in the store? And surely we're going to be closed if they find out this manager is dead. So we're going to prop them up and do all the silly things from that. The toys also know about this. Of course, the humans don't know the toys exist. And now the toys have this crisis at hand. Do they do the right thing and expose the plot of the dead boss? Or do they realize that if they don't get in cahoots with the two humans to save the story, that in fact saves their whole world? They live in the store. And so what do? Is it about family and protecting your community as toys and preserving the store so it can live on and pass, whatever? Or do you expose the plot of the dead boss? And hilarious ensues, right? This was all created out of this prompt in Claude. And then once again, like the other prompts, did a really, really great job with this and really reworked the prompt a little bit. So I just want to use this as an example of how you could easily play. And if anybody wants this prompt, I'm more than happy to share it with you. This is nothing proprietary. So if you want to go play with it yourself, I'll make this prompt available to you and you can go have some fun with it as well.
Okay, I want to touch on something that you mentioned here about the left-right combination in the Anthropic Console. Mm-hmm. What you generate from a prompt that's in the user section, not the assistant output of the thread, which is on the left-hand side. Mm-hmm. What you generate with any prompt that you run with specific variables, and those variables might tune, the result that you get. It's not yet in the thread.
Correct.
But you can choose to put it in the thread. Now, what does that mean? Once it's in the thread, then your session understands everything in the thread as context, in addition to any additional context that you may introduce by adding it as a user message. So the assistant messages now become a part of the knowledge that the model is using whenever it responds. So here you have this iterative process in Anthropic's console where you can modify your prompt in the user message on the left, until you get a response on the right that you think is the right kind of response for the assistant. And then you can add it to the thread. And now you have this virtuous series in the chat history that's in the thread of good user prompts, good assistant responses that you've tuned through the console.
Yeah, that well said. And so really, I just went ahead and did that while you were talking about it, Andy, if anybody wants to go back and watch this, or if you're watching this with us. And so I went ahead and ran it. So basically it's programmed to say, hey, are you happy with the results so far? Do you want to make any changes to the story as we're going along, so that it's an iterative process with the user? I just said yes. And then I hit run again in the upper right corner here. That produces a whole new response on the right-hand side. But what you said, Andy, is really important, which is that I can now play with this. I can change the model. I can see if the Haiku instant in Haiku perhaps produced just as well, which means my price goes down. My cost of running this API goes down because I'm using the most powerful model. Maybe I don't need the most powerful model. Maybe my temperature would be better set at 0.3 versus 1 on here. Maybe I need to expand my max token length a little bit on the side. And like you're saying, Andy, I could rerun this until I'm happy with it. Now, if I'm happy with this, down at the bottom on the right-hand side, you just say add the conversation. It's got even a little arrow that points off to the left. And boom, it adds it to the discussion. And then like you said, Andy, now it's part of the canyon, right? So now it's part of this story that I'm building, and it's added into we can call it the context window or the memory of this. And anything that happens after this will now be pulled into it. But I can play and test first. If you had to do this in just a normal ChatGPT window or normal Claude, by the way, if you're just using that, number one, you can't adjust temperature. Number two, you can't really adjust the model, or you can't adjust the model. It'll probably do it on the back end for you. Number three, what you would have to do is get the result and then edit it along the way and come back to it, which is fine if you already have a good prompt that works already a lot of the time. But in the building testing phase, this is how you want to do it, because this gives you way more control over the outputs before you commit to something long-term. And then, of course, look, we haven't said it, but this is the workbench. So any of this could be attached to an API, which means anything I'm doing here could be done inside a Google Sheet. It could be done inside of Google, whatever. You know, I could be tossing every one of these answers over to Slack or some combined Google file that all of us are looking at together if we were co-working on a project. So there's just a lot, of additional resources for this.
So one of the things that this makes easy is setting up few shot prompting. So let's say that you have a particular kind of article that you want to publish on LinkedIn. You do that weekly. You can set up variables that have a topic, right? You can have Claude Opus, which is the better, more reasoning, better writer model, create a response to that. And you can do that multiple times, add it to the conversation. So now you have 5 of those prompts and 5 of those articles. Now, within that same situation, in that same prompt thread, you can switch to see if now you're using Sonnet with 5 examples that Claude Opus just wrote for you. Can you get the same output or a similar output based on that? You can do this with the other models, but you're copying and pasting and doing various things because it's not designed to just say, hey, we think you have enough. Let's try the cheaper model on this. Right. And that's a way to get to a very robust process quickly.
Good. Let me mention something about prompt libraries here, because Console becomes a prompt library for you, and it's not an expensive proposition. Yeah, it has a little bit of overhead if you're not real, familiar with getting an API key, which is literally point and click. Generate an API key for me. You have to set up an account with a credit card. And then you have to load that account with $25, or they have a minimum, I think. And then you can set it to continuously recharge that. So now you have an API access, and you can work with this console that we've been showing you today. What we did was we created, and we can name those prompts that we were working on. And then if you were to share your screen again and click on that prompts, hamburger menu, it'll present all of the prompts that you've developed and worked on in the console. And you can then choose one of those the next time you come back and run it, or you can use it as a starting point for modifying. And this is the fastest and easiest way for you to actually develop a set of prompts that actually work for you in your personal workflow or in your personal, endeavors.
And depending on what you do, it may be cheaper than paying for $20 for the month for Claude.
Yes.
The one disadvantage, or the disadvantage that I want to highlight in this that is different from paying for the full subscription to Claude is that in the console you can only add images. In regular Claude, you can add files. So one of the demos I wanted to give was summarize this PDF of a book that was written in 1923. So there's no problem with public domain, but you cannot do that. You can only upload pictures.
Yeah,
that's
it
Claude,
says you can upload 20 images at 5 megabytes per image. And I'm not sure how that would be helpful if you can't.
And Claude doesn't have internet access. Right. So Claude can't, so you can't give it a URL and have it go out, unlike ChatGPT. You could do that sort of thing. So
just in terms of expenses, I recently charged up my account at Anthropic with $25 after a couple of days of playing, just to prepare for this demonstration. It's used a total of about 40 cents.
Yeah. It's generally
very inexpensive.
It's generally less expensive to go through the consoles, the back end, Google AI Studio, console for Claude, Playground for ChatGPT.
I just looked at mine. Mine was about $1 over the last 24 hours, which is a lot, but there's some long threads in here and they were all using Opus. And that's a good way to look at it. Like Beth was just saying. But what if you don't need Opus to run your prompt? It would be great to know you could run it on Haiku and get very similar results. If there's no degradation in the quality of the prompt, use the cheapest one. It's going to be faster. You don't need to use Opus for everything. And I think that's a real good call out because Sonnet is amazing. Haiku could be amazing. I haven't used Haiku a lot on there. We keep hearing about these Flash. Google has come out with a Flash version. Recce, that's the company from last week, right? That we were looking at. They have a Flash version of it, which are these supposed to be very sort of smaller model, very fast. But the reality is, a lot of times they're already plenty good enough for what you need. And what you really should be looking at is adjusting temperature and things like that. Not necessarily saying, oh, well, they said Haiku is their most powerful model. That's the one I want. Well, you're going to pay for that. And you may be able to accomplish something for 5 cents that would otherwise cost you $1 or more. And if this is going to be an API call where you're footing the bill to it, like maybe your team is using or whatever, you probably want to put the extra time in to figure out if you can get that cost down as low as possible, especially if it's a solution for your team internally. Even if the company's footing the bill over the month of using something like this into like a Google Sheet or a Slack or some solution like that, of using Haiku versus a month of using, Opus versus Haiku, could be the difference between a $50 bill at the end of the month and a $5 bill at the end of the month for the company. Massive.
And few shot is incredibly powerful. For people who don't know what I mean by that, it is giving examples. So often we give 2 examples. This is what I mean, or 1 example. And it does a good job. Maybe it doesn't do a good job when you move down to the lower model. But what if you give 10 examples? How good is that? What if you give 15, 20, 25, right? As you go down to the lower models, the costs decrease enough that it may be fine. You've generated 25 of these examples that you had Opus write, and now you can do all of this with Haiku or Sonnet.
That's right. Yep. And I just want to reference that there are research papers that are showing that this few or many shot example approaches using the smaller models can be as good or even better than a 0 shot prompt against the largest model. So if you're lazy, use the zero shot. If you're really lazy, use Claude as console and ask it to generate your prompt for you. But if you're really going to work on a production process, a workflow, providing multiple examples, and we're talking about on the order of magnitude of 10, can make it so that you can use one of these smaller models that are really, really inexpensive, fractions of a cent for each run.
And the only thing I wanted to show real quick is real quick back on the dashboard side of things where Andy started off. I do want to point out that they have a prompt. Here it is, prompt library. And then if you click on that prompt library here, so I can switch over to it. There are a ton of prompts that you can start from. So something that I did was I took somewhere down here, there's a Socratic prompt. The other is Socratic Sage. And so you can actually take this prompt, which you can read. If you click on it, it'll give it to you. Well, then I took that Socratic one. Let me see where it is real quick. Well, I can go back into it. 1 second. Socratic prompting. Let's go to this tab. So then what I did, I don't need to walk through the whole scenario, but basically what I did was I took that prompt, I put it into the dashboard. I said, write a better prompt than what you already have in your prompt library, Claude or Anthropic. And then it did. And then we were able to be off to the races. And so what this prompt does, by the way, it's great, is it just introduces Socratic questioning by asking follow-up questions, open-ended questions on any topic you want. So if we look at the variables, it's like, what's the topic? I said the role of generative AI in business in the next 2 years. And what you can't, even if you can't see it on here, it asked me what I thought. I gave an answer back. And this is another great idea about the Scratchpad, where it's saying, okay, well, the user just said this. That's sort of maybe a closed thought, or maybe he's not thinking, but he's not saying he, but you know what it's saying. It's saying the user thought about this and this, but they didn't identify this part. I should probably ask follow-up questions about this area. And then lo and behold, the next thing you see is, the Claude or the model you're using saying, hey, you mentioned this. What about that? What about this area of it? So this is just a cool, and you can go do this right now by using their prompt library and then expanding on it, making it a better one, changing out the variable to whatever you want the topic to be, and just having fun with it. So horses, or, the role of generative AI, or whatever your favorite topic is, it'd be fun to just kind of go in there and watch how Claude uses the Scratchpad in there to think about your answers as the user and how it wants to come back to you to give a better result. So just kind of cool. Wanted to make sure we called that out on there. Okay, before we wrap up, any last thoughts on this? I mean, overall, are we giving it a, we don't really have a ranking on this show, but we're giving it a thumbs up? Are we giving it, are we telling everybody they should use it? Andy says yes, thumbs up.
Claude Opus is great, and this console is easy to work with.
Karl?
And by the way, it's console.anthropic.com if you want to check it out. Karl, what do you think?
If you can get access to it, yes. Literally. And I'm lucky that I got it, because I got it way back when, but it's if you live in in one of the countries that you can't, Canada, it's
or Australia too, right? Aaron doesn't have access to it.
Yeah, well, it really sucks, because I think of all the tools, this is such a good one to help teams learn how to prompt, because it shows you, it's like, how do I prompt? And you could take all these courses, but this is just put your idea in, and it gives you an example of how to do it. And there's a lot of people who, you could tell them, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to add this, you got to, few shot. But if they see on a regular basis, they could just input really straight, what they're thinking, and it turns into a prompt. That's, to me, one of the best learning experiences. And it's tough to present this to clients, because it's oh, we want to use this. Well, you kind of can't, especially locally. So so if you have access to it, amazing tool to take advantage of, and just visually learn how to get some good prompts. I did notice, though, of all the tools, Claude and Anthropic really like their XML tags. It's the only one that really emphasizes XML tags.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to read. Even if you don't know what an XML tag is, I will tell you, I'm not a coder, not hard to follow along on what they're doing. It's just the way they put the brackets around it and stuff like that. But super easy to adapt to it if you haven't used that before. I want to say this too, just real quick as we're wrapping up. If you like these types of shows, we're all about the user feedback. We want to put out more shows. And sometimes we do shows like this, which are very visual hands-on. Let us walk you through this. Let us show you how to get more value or how we're getting more value out of these particular tools. Let us know. I mean, we're always happy to do more shows, or maybe we'll provide some additional side content that you guys can access in other ways, maybe on our YouTube channel or whatever, where maybe off the show, our crew here will do a deep dive into something and kind of show you how to use it. Not that we want to get into a, how-to show or anything like that, but if this is interesting to you and you'd like to see more topics like this be explored and more products or services like this be explored, I guess tools, let us know. We'd always like to know the feedback from you guys on that kind of stuff. And of course, if you're like, what's that, Beth?
Sorry, absolutely, yes. I'm gonna bop in and say a couple things before you take us out.
Go for it.
One, my position is yes. I think this is a great tool. Again, sorry, Canada. It would be lovely to be able to share things with you. And second, today is the penultimate or the eve before the beginning of the Sci-Fi show. We are dropping tomorrow, so look for that.
Look for it where? Where can they find it, Beth?
We'll have links to it on both our LinkedIn page and also the YouTube channel.
Okay. It will also be going out to our podcasts, or it will only reside on YouTube?
No, it will go out to the podcast as well.
Okay.
Those will be ultimately separate or sub channels, but for the first episode, you'll be able to grab it.
Love it. Awesome. We'll check that out. I can't wait either. I can't wait to listen.
We haven't seen anything about it. And so Beth and Jimmy have been doing this. So we're going to be an eager audience.
For sure. I can't wait. All right. That comes out tomorrow. That'd be 5/18 for anybody that's listening to this, just so you know. And we'll wrap it up. We have a whole bunch of interesting topics that we think we're going to dive into next week. We haven't said anything in stone yet, but unlike this week where it was like news and respond and news and respond, we just had some other ideas we want to talk about in terms of AI. So come back next week, hang out with us once again. And we will have lots of conversations and topics around AI. Thank you to everybody with all the interactions and responses this week. Man, have we really seen an uptick in people commenting live. If you like to do that, get on our LinkedIn, get on our YouTube. You can comment live on the show, and we always take those into consideration. So if you want to interact a little bit more with the show live, don't forget, you can always do that Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern by either interacting on our LinkedIn live or going directly to YouTube and doing it there as well. And you can join the commenters that are already there, like Jen and everybody else. So until next week, have a great weekend. Don't forget to check out the show tomorrow. It's coming out. I can't wait. And we will see you guys on Monday. Till then, bye.